Have you ever felt the forest watching you, even when you were alone? Where the silence feels heavier than sound. Where your flashlight can't cut through the darkness. And the trees whisper your name when no one else is around. Tonight, on Whisper Tales, we journey deep into the woods with 3 terrifying true encounters that will make you think twice before your next camping trip. Real people, real horrors. These are not just stories. They are warnings. Story 1: The Ritual in the Pines. Just me, the woods, and the quiet I'd been craving for weeks. I wasn't some thrill-seeking adventurer or anything like that. I was just exhausted. Mentally, emotionally. Life in the city had become too much. Noise, people, deadlines. I needed to breathe, away from everything. So I picked a lesser-known trail in northern Oregon. Deep forest, barely marked, untouched by crowds. A friend of mine had told me about it a year ago. Something about miles of untouched wilderness, and no signal for miles. That sounded perfect. I packed lightly but smart. Tent, sleeping bag, headlamp, water filter, snacks, a map, and a small hunting knife, just in case. I arrived at the trailhead around 5 p.m., a bit later than planned, but I figured I'd hike for an hour, find a decent spot to camp, and settle in before it got too dark. The air smelled like pine and damp soil. A breeze rustled the leaves overhead, and the only sounds were my boots crunching against the earth and the distant call of a bird. Peaceful, quiet, exactly what I needed, but even in that peace, there was something off. Maybe it was how quickly the forest got dark, or how the trees seemed unnaturally close together, their branches arching overhead like they were leaning in. I told myself it was just my city brain playing tricks on me. I kept walking. About an hour in, I found a small clearing, just big enough for a tent. I set up quickly, lit a small fire with some dry twigs I found nearby, and made a quick meal from a can of beans. The sun had dipped behind the trees, and night had swallowed the woods in a thick blanket of darkness. I tried to check my phone out of habit. No signal, not even one bar. Good, I told myself. That's the point. I lay in my tent, zipped up tight in my sleeping bag, staring at the nylon roof above me, listening. The silence was deep. No crickets, no owls, just nothing. And then I heard it. A rustle, not far off. It wasn't an animal. I've heard raccoons, deer, even bears before. This was different. It sounded like movement. Careful, deliberate, like someone trying not to be heard. I sat up quickly, my heart thudding. I grabbed my headlamp, flicked it on, and unzipped the tent just enough to peek out. The beam scanned across trees and brush. Nothing. I waited. Silence again. Maybe it was just the wind. A squirrel. I lay back down and forced myself to close my eyes. But it happened again. Closer this time. This time it was unmistakable. Soft snap of a twig underfoot. Then, whispering. Not clear words. Just the sound of voices. Low, urgent. My body went cold. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I turned off my headlamp. The whispering continued for a few more seconds, and then stopped. Dead silence. I stayed frozen in my bag, knife gripped tight in my fist, eyes wide in the darkness. I don't know how long I stayed like that. Minutes, hours. Eventually, I must have dozed off. The next thing I remember was waking up to pale morning light filtering through the tent. It was quiet again. Normal, quiet. Birds chirping. Squirrels rustling in the underbrush. I stepped out of the tent, shaken but trying to act normal. I told myself maybe I dreamt it. Sleep paralysis, maybe. Or some campers messing around. Still, something gnawed at me. I walked a small circle around my campsite, and then I saw them. Footprints. 2 sets. Clear. Impressions in the dirt not 20 feet from my tent. They weren't hiking boots. They looked like bare feet. Dirty. Thin. One was much smaller than the other, almost childlike. I felt sick. I should have packed up and left then. I really should have. But I didn't. I told myself I'd come all this way. It was probably nothing. Maybe local kids. Maybe someone wandered off a nearby trail. I wish I hadn't stayed. That evening, I hiked a bit farther in, trying to shake the unease. I reached a ridge that overlooked a valley choked with trees and mist. It was beautiful, untouched. But again, that feeling crept in. Like being watched. I turned around and hiked back quickly. The second night was worse. At around midnight, I heard it again. First, the footsteps. Slow. Dragging. Then the voices. This time, they were clearer. Still whispering. Still unintelligible, except for one word. My name. They said my name, over and over. Soft. Almost playful. Daniel. My blood froze. I didn't tell anyone where I was going except one friend. No one should know my name. The whispering stopped. I unzipped the tent as slowly as I could and scanned with the headlamp. And that's when I saw them. Two figures standing at the edge of the clearing, not moving. One tall, one much shorter. Their faces were wrong, pale, hollow. The light from my headlamp seemed to flicker when it touched them. Then, they vanished. I don't mean they ran. I mean they were there, and then gone. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even stay in the tent. I packed my gear and sat against a tree with my knife in one hand and flashlight in the other until the sky turned gray. I left at dawn, but the woods didn't let me leave easily. Every few minutes, I heard movement behind me. I turned. Nothing. The woods were too quiet. The trees too still. Then I started noticing things hanging from branches. Little objects made of twigs tied with string. Like symbols. Shapes. Some looked like human figures. At one point, I passed the same crooked tree 3 times. I was going in circles. I should have reached the trailhead in under 2 hours. It took me 6. When I finally burst out of the forest and into the dirt lot where my car was parked, I dropped to my knees and cried. I was dirty, exhausted, shaking. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. On my windshield, under the wiper, was a small object. A figure made of twigs, tied together with red string. I don't remember the drive back. I just remember locking every door in my apartment and curling up in my bed for 2 days. I tried to forget, tried to tell myself I was just tired, stressed, imagining things. But 2 nights ago, I woke up at 3 a.m. There was a figure standing at the end of my hallway. Tall, still, watching. When I turned on the light, it was gone. But on the floor, right where it stood, was another twig figure. Tied with red string. I don't hike anymore. And I don't sleep much either. Story 2 echoes of my childhood. I've always thought I was over my childhood fears. I mean, don't we all grow out of them eventually? The dark, the creaking sounds, the shadows that looked like figures when the lights went out, they were just silly tricks of the mind. At least, that's what I told myself. But something happened to me last month that made me realize the truth. Those fears never really left. They just went to sleep, waiting for the right moment to come back. It started with a camping trip. I'm 27 years old. I live alone in a quiet apartment in Portland, and I work as a freelance illustrator. Most of my work is digital, and I don't get out much. So when my old school friend Max invited me to go camping for a weekend, I said yes almost immediately. He said, "Let's go back to where we used to camp as kids, Echo Pine Forest." The name alone made my chest tighten. Echo Pine wasn't just any forest. It was where I had my worst childhood nightmare. When I was 9, I went camping there with my parents. In the middle of the night, I saw something, or someone, standing outside our tent. A tall, shadowy figure with glowing eyes. I screamed and screamed, but when my dad rushed out with a flashlight, there was nothing there. They told me I was dreaming. I believed them, or at least, I tried to. Now Max wanted to go back. And for some reason, I agreed. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that it was all in my head. That there was nothing to be scared of. We packed light. Just 2 tents, some canned food, sleeping bags, and flashlights. The drive took 3 hours. The forest looked just like I remembered. Tall, silent trees, damp earth, and that strange hush, like the woods were always listening. We hiked about a mile in and found a small clearing beside a dry stream bed. The place felt peaceful, but cold. Even in the afternoon sun, I felt a strange chill in my spine. Perfect spot, Max said cheerfully. I smiled and nodded, but something in me was already tightening, like my body remembered something my mind didn't. We set up camp, cooked some instant noodles, and watched the stars come out. Max fell asleep early, snoring softly in his tent. I stayed up a little longer, sitting near the fire, sketching in my notebook. That's when I started hearing it. Soft whispering. At first, I thought it was the wind. But the way the trees moved didn't match the sound. The whispering wasn't random. It had a rhythm, a pulse, and it was coming from the woods. I turned off my flashlight and listened. The whispering stopped. Everything went dead silent. Not even the bugs were chirping. Suddenly, I felt eyes on me. I spun around, shining the flashlight into the trees. Nothing. But my heart was thumping hard. I tried to calm myself, reminding myself that I was an adult, not some frightened kid. I crawled into my tent, zipped it up, and lay still. I told myself it was just the forest's normal noises. Just my imagination. Then I woke up in the middle of the night. But I wasn't in my tent. I was standing in the woods, alone. I had no memory of how I got there. I was barefoot, and the ground beneath me was cold and wet. I turned around, trying to find the campsite. But there was nothing, just trees in every direction. Then I heard it again. The whispering, only this time, it was louder and closer. I turned in every direction, but I couldn't see where it was coming from. Suddenly, I saw something move between the trees. A shape, tall, thin, pale. It stepped out slowly. It had no face, just stretched, smooth skin, and long, twitching fingers. I froze. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. The thing raised its hand and pointed behind me. I turned, and saw something even worse. It was me, but younger. A 9-year-old version of me. Dressed in the same pajamas I wore that night all those years ago. He looked terrified, his eyes wide, lips trembling. He mouthed something. I couldn't hear it clearly, but I knew what it was. Run. I turned back to the faceless creature, but it was gone. I ran. Branches slapped my face, my arms, but I didn't stop. I didn't even know where I was going. I just ran. Eventually, I stumbled back into the clearing. Max was sitting up, flashlight in hand, looking confused. "Dude, where the hell were you?" he asked. I don't know, I panted. I didn't tell him what I saw. I just crawled into my tent, trembling. The next day, I had scratches all over my arms and legs. Max thought I sleepwalked. I let him believe that. But I knew the truth. The fear I had as a child, it was never gone. It had been waiting, watching, and now it knew where to find me. We packed up and left early. I haven't spoken to Max since. I still dream about that night. I see the younger version of me, lost in the woods, crying. And I see the faceless thing, waiting in the trees. Sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I still hear the whispering. And now, I sleep, with the lights on, just in case. Story 3: Whisper in the Woods. I've always believed that camping in the forest could be healing. That's why, after years of therapy and pills that barely worked, I decided to return to a place I hadn't been since I was 9 years old. A place buried in the folds of my childhood, wrapped in shadows I never fully understood. Back then, I went with my parents to a dense, quiet forest in the north. I remembered pine trees so tall they looked like giants, and a lake so still it felt like glass. But I also remembered something else. Something I never talked about. I had dreams every night during that trip. Dreams of whispers. Dreams of shadows standing at the edge of the trees. I would wake up with scratches on my legs, even though I hadn't left the tent. I used to cry and tell my mom there were voices calling me from the woods. But they never believed me. Now, nearly 20 years later, I found myself drawn back to that same place. I told my friends I wanted solitude, some time away to reconnect with nature and clear my head. But the truth was, I needed answers. I packed light. Just a tent, some food, a flashlight, a few books, and a journal. As I hiked deeper into the forest, I felt something strange. The air was heavier here. Not polluted. Just dense, like the trees were watching me. By the time I reached the lake, the sun had started to dip behind the trees. The reflection of the woods in the still water gave me chills. Everything was just as I remembered. Too perfect, too untouched. I set up my tent by the edge and built a small fire. The warmth helped, but the unease remained. I tried to write in my journal, but all I managed was a sentence: why did I come back? That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of fear, yet, but because of the strange silence. Forests are never truly quiet. There should have been rustling leaves, insects, maybe even an owl. But there was nothing. Then, around midnight, I heard it, whispering. Not the wind, not leaves. Real whispering, soft, repeating. I held my breath. It was coming from just outside the tent. I slowly unzipped the flap and looked out. My fire had burned low, casting long, twitching shadows against the trees. Hello, I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. Silence. Then, something moved. Between two trees. Just a flash of white. I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it where I'd seen the movement. Nothing. But when I turned around to zip the tent back up, I froze. On the side of the tent, written in what looked like mud, or blood, were the words, "Welcome back." My heart dropped. I hadn't seen anyone all day. No other camps. No hikers. Just me. I ran to the lake, splashed water on my face, and told myself I was tired. Hallucinating. Maybe. This was stress. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The next morning, things got worse. My journal was gone. In its place was an old, worn notebook that wasn't mine. I opened it. Every page was filled with the same sentence. The woods remember. Over and over again. Hundreds of times. I tossed it away and decided to hike back. I didn't care if I came for answers. I wanted out. But when I reached the path I came from, it wasn't there. It was just trees. I turned back, walked in another direction. Same thing. Nothing but endless forest. The lake was still there, so I knew I wasn't completely lost. But the path was gone, like the forest had swallowed it. Overnight, I told myself to stay calm. Maybe I just misremembered. I'd try again after food and rest. That evening, as I cooked, I heard something from the woods. A voice. Not a whisper this time. It sounded like a child. It said my name. Daniel. I froze. No one else knew I was here. I hadn't told anyone the exact location. Then I saw her, a little girl, maybe 8 years old, in a dirty white dress, standing between the trees. Her skin was pale, her hair wet and stringy. She looked like she'd stepped out of a swamp. But her eyes were all black. No whites, just black holes. She tilted her head and smiled at me. "Do you remember me?" she asked. My legs gave out, and I fell backwards onto the ground. "Who? What are you?" I choked out. "You saw me when you were little," she said. "You left me here." Then she vanished. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't hold the flashlight. I barely slept that night, and when I did, I had a nightmare. In the dream, I was 9 again, walking into the forest. Alone. I followed a song, a sweet, soft lullaby. I found a girl crying by the lake. She said she was lost. She asked me to play with her. I said I had to go back. She grabbed my arm and screamed. Her face twisted into something awful. Rotten. Hollow. Her mouth opened wider than it should have, and bugs poured out. I woke up screaming. The last day, I tried to climb a tree to get a better view, maybe see a road, anything. At the top, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Tents. Dozens of them. Old, torn tents scattered through the forest, barely visible from the ground. Like people had camped here and never left. I climbed down and ran. The girl was waiting for me near the lake. She wasn't alone. Behind her, in the shadows, stood others. Men, women, children, all pale, all with black eyes. They whispered together. The woods remember. They moved closer. I grabbed my bag and ran. I don't remember how long. Hours maybe. But eventually, I found the path. Or it found me. I stumbled out of the forest, dirty, bleeding, half crazed. When I got home, I tried to tell people what happened. They said I had a breakdown, that I hallucinated, but I know what I saw. And the worst part, every night since, I hear her voice. In my dreams, she's still waiting. And one day, I know I'll be back. Story 4: The Spirit in the Pines. I've always enjoyed solo camping. There's something peaceful about being alone in nature. The silence, the stars, the freedom. But the last time I went into the forest, I came back changed. Not just emotionally, but spiritually. Some people believe in ghosts. Some don't. I didn't. But now, I know better. This happened just 6 months ago. I had found a new spot online, an isolated pine forest up north that barely anyone visited. Most trails were overgrown, and some weren't even marked on current maps anymore. That's what made it perfect for me. I wanted to disconnect completely. From social media, from people, from noise. I packed everything I needed for 3 nights and started my hike on a Friday morning. The trail was beautiful. Thick pine trees on both sides, the scent of needles and earth, and the quiet crunch of dry leaves beneath my boots. After about 4 hours of hiking, I found a small clearing surrounded by tall trees that looked untouched. It was exactly what I'd hoped for. I set up my tent, gathered firewood, and cooked dinner. That first night was calm, nothing strange. I sat by the fire, reading an old paperback, and listened to the wind rustle through the branches. Eventually, I crawled into my sleeping bag and fell asleep easily. But, at some point in the middle of the night, I woke up. Not because of a sound, but because of complete silence. Dead silence. I couldn't even hear the wind. You don't realize how unnatural silence is until you're in the middle of a forest and there's nothing. No bugs, no wind, not even the creak of trees. I sat up, heart racing. My flashlight was within reach, so I grabbed it and shined it around the tent. Nothing. No movement. No animals. Just blackness outside the nylon walls. I lay back down, trying to ignore the dread growing in my chest. That's when I heard it. A single, soft knock. Coming from outside the tent. Knock. Then again. Knock. Knock. Not random. Not a branch falling. But deliberate. Like someone, or something, was tapping the tent. I held my breath. Then, a voice. It was barely a whisper, but I heard it clearly. You shouldn't be here. I shot up, unzipped the tent, and pointed my flashlight out. No one, but my fire, was out. And I always let it burn until the embers die on their own. Something had put it out. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. In the morning, I told myself it was a dream. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe the fire went out by itself. I wasn't going to pack up and leave just because of a weird night. I'd come here for peace. That day, I hiked deeper into the woods, found a stream, took pictures. It was beautiful, yet I kept feeling watched. Every now and then, I'd hear rustling behind me, but whenever I turned around, there was nothing. No animals, just the still forest. When I returned to camp, I noticed something strange. My tent zipper was halfway open. I was sure I'd closed it completely. Inside, my gear had been moved. Not stolen, not messed up, just rearranged, like someone had gone in and looked around. Still, I tried to keep calm. Maybe it was wind, maybe a raccoon, anything but what my mind was suggesting. But that night, something changed. I started dreaming. At first, it was a woman's voice. Gentle, repeating my name, calling me. Then the dreams became darker. I saw myself, younger, maybe 10 years old, lost in the woods. I was crying, calling out for my parents. And then, she appeared. A tall woman in white, barefoot, long black hair, covering her face. She reached her hand out to me, whispering in a language I didn't understand. When I woke up, my cheeks were wet. I'd been crying. And when I stepped outside the tent, I froze. In front of the tent, on the dirt, were bare footprints, leading from the woods to where I'd been sleeping. I wanted to leave. Every part of me screamed go home, but I couldn't. It was like something was holding me there. Like the forest wouldn't let me go. I sat by the fire that night, gripping my flashlight, trying to stay awake. That's when she appeared, across the clearing, just between two trees. I saw her, tall, pale, long dark hair flowing like smoke in the windless air. She didn't move, she just watched me. I tried to speak, but my voice cracked. Who are you? She didn't answer. I stood up slowly, trembling, and took a step toward her. She vanished, gone, like smoke in the wind, but in her place, I heard the wind again. For the first time since I'd arrived. I barely slept, and at first light, I packed up everything. I started hiking back, following my trail on GPS. But the trees, they looked different. Too close, too quiet. I walked for hours. The path should have taken me 3. But by midday, I was still in the forest. Still no signal. And then my GPS glitched. The dot showing my location started spinning in circles. Then froze. Then disappeared. I was lost. I screamed. I cried. I threw the GPS against a tree. Then I heard her. The voice. Go back to the water. It echoed from all directions. No. I shouted. I want to leave. Go back to the water, it said again. I started running. Randomly. No direction in mind. Just away from the voice. But no matter which way I went, I ended up in the same place. The clearing. My fire pit still warm. Tent poles still sticking out of the ground. The forest had looped me back. I collapsed, sobbing. That night, she came again. This time, she stood closer. I could see her face. And it wasn't angry. It was sad. She knelt beside me and whispered, "They never found me. I was just like you. I didn't understand. Long ago," she said, "I came here alone, too. I died in these woods. Lost, afraid, cold. Now I try to help the ones who come here after me." Tears filled my eyes. "Then why did you scare me?" "Because you weren't listening." She reached out and touched my forehead. It felt like ice, but also warm, familiar. Suddenly, images flooded my mind. A search party, a girl's body beneath the roots of a pine tree, a necklace in the dirt, and then, darkness. When I opened my eyes, I was standing at the trailhead. My backpack on. The forest behind me. I don't know how I got there. I got in my car and drove until I hit the nearest town. I never went back, but I think about her. The spirit in the pines. She didn't want to harm me. She wanted to warn me. Some places remember. Some places hold on to souls. And some forests, they don't let go until they're ready. Congratulations, you've made it back from the woods, for now. But some stories, they follow you home. If these tales sent shivers down your spine, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more terrifying encounters every week. And remember, this is Whisper Tales, and we'll be waiting, if you dare to come back.